Beth, you've been in Stonington your whole entire life?
Yep. Yep, my whole life.
You went to school?
I did.
In Stonington?
Went to school, Stonington schools. Yep.
What type of kid were you in school?
Horrible.
Yeah?
Yeah, I was a horrible student. I barely graduated. I went to. I had like interventions when I was young, but way back when I was a student, it was like you were either very clearly disabled or you were lazy. And I didn't look like I had a problem, and so I was lazy. I just couldn't read. And I didn't understand, why my phone is ringing. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
My
I told
dad.
you, any calls, we got to take them.
No, it's my dad.
Work is never-
He's got dementia.
Oh.
I'll answer it, and he'll say, "I didn't mean to call you." I'm like, okay, perfect, John. And we're rolling. So I was a horrible student, and I hated school. And my goal when I turned 16 was to drop out. So I was like, I just got to get to 16, and then I'm going to quit school. And the problem with that plan was that I, of course, lived at home, and I had just bought my first horse. And I started riding when I was in kindergarten, but we could not afford it. And so as soon as I was like big enough to work, which was probably when I was like 10, because back then you could work. There were no sort of like legal issues with manual labor and children.
Right.
I just worked until I could buy my own horse, and I had like just turned 16 when I bought my horse. I paid $1 a pound for him because he was going to the slaughterhouse.
You're kidding.
Yeah, so I paid $900. I like scraped it up. I had a little bit, and I like begged people and like took out little baby loans to buy him. And my dad said, "Well, you can drop out, but then I'm going to throw you out of the house." I was like,
So was he
"All
as
right."
cool as you made that sound like?
Yeah, he was
they-
like, "You can drop, if you drop out, you're not living here." And I was like, "All right, well, I need a place to live because I need to go to work, and I can't keep my horse if I don't go to work." And so I stayed in school. And I think my parents didn't believe me when I said I was going to graduate. I think they called the school and were like, "Are you sure she's graduating?" Because I went to school during the day, and then I would go to work in the afternoon at the barn, and then I would go back to school and go to like finish, get more credits with the adults that were getting their GEDs.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting because I was with adults, which was nice because I felt like an adult. But I was also seeing people that didn't graduate with their peers.
You graduated?
I did graduate on time, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I think when I went back to school at 30, I went back to school, back to college. And, well, not back to. It was my first foray into college. I had to get my transcripts. And my GPA was 1.67, which is pretty abysmal.
But you were determined, like, you wanted to have your own horse.
Right.
You were willing to work and do whatever it took to get there. So it wasn't that, because I noticed that was kind of my issue too. I wasn't very good at school.
No.
Because I was lazy, I just didn't have that drive. I had that drive. So would you say that was mostly, I think you already kind of hinted, was just...
Yeah, I couldn't read. That was,
Yeah.
I couldn't read until I was an adult, really. I always had this issue with my vision where I saw two of everything. And so I never knew that that's not how other people saw things.
Oh, wow.
Like I had remedial reading as a little kid, and I remember being really frustrated that I was always pulled out of class, pulled away from my friends when we were on the carpet, and it was my turn to read. I just remember always saying, "Wait," and starting over. "Wait," starting over.
Which is a confidence killer.
Oh,
Killer,
absolutely. So
especially
it's
as a
like,
kid.
I'm just going to shrink,
Yeah.
and you don't see me here. I'm just going to hide in the back, and I just couldn't do it. Like no matter how hard I tried, and it's embarrassing when you're in high school to read with your finger. So it's cooler to just not do your work.
Right.
So I just didn't do my work.
Or at least not feel bad about yourself.
Yeah, it was
And-
just like I'll just
Not
be
try.
naughty
Yeah.
and not get my work done instead.
But you wanted the horse.
But I wanted my horse.
And you ended up getting the horse?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah?
Yep. He was great. It was just such an unbelievable experience. It was like something that was mine, that I had worked for, and
What did you do for work in order to get the
I
horse?
just worked on the farm.
That's it?
Yeah.
Oh, that was it? Okay.
Yeah, just all day on weekends, sun up to sundown. And then, I would go from school directly to the barn, and from the barn directly back to school, and home, shower, go to bed, and get up and do it all the next day.
Was there anything that drew you to why were you so passionate about?
I have
getting a
no
horse?
idea. It just made me happy.
Gotcha.
And I think a lot of kids feel like that there's something about a horse that's really incredible, and they're so huge and they can take you out in a minute.
Yeah.
But you get them to trust you, and it's almost like addictive. Like I still dream about, like I was dreaming about horses last night. I still dream about horses all the time, and we didn't have any money, and Stonington's a rough town to be a poor kid in. So, I would ride with these girls who, it was just like they'd get pony after pony after pony. And I would overhear when I was older, and had more of an idea of what it all meant to have money and not have money. I would hear that, parents would send these kids trainers just out with the check and go find my kid a really good show pony, and I just was so baffled by it. And so I rode at a really expensive place in Gales Ferry, and I would ride the horses that would come in that were like test horses. So I would ride them and be like the test dummy, because
I was about to say, like, not like you see in those, when they get the car and they see how the dummy works. Like, are they?
Oh yeah,
saying
that was me.
This horse might not be safe.
Yeah, no, that was me.
I'm
I
your
got
girl, yeah.
like kicked in the head, and I got slammed into walls and shoved into walls and stepped on and trampled and bitten, and I didn't care because I was near horses. But you're not going to do that to the kid that's paying all that money every
Right.
month. You're going to do it to the disposable kid that you just need to give something to do so she'll leave you alone.
Right.
So I was never like a pretty rider, but I could stay on anything.
Were your parents like conflicted? Like, because this, like I said, really resonates with me, because high school I just didn't have the confidence, and it was just easier to not try as
Yeah.
opposed to try and fail, 'cause then you feel worse. But your parents, they look at like, well, Beth's not good at school, but she has a drive or a mentality. Like, how did your parents take from all this?
My mom always said that if I didn't find horses, I would have been in jail. So I think she was just glad I found something to do. I think they always felt badly that they couldn't give me more. I just remember she would always say, "You were born to the wrong family," because of course, I picked the most expensive thing I could pick,
Yeah.
and we just couldn't even begin to afford it. And
Any siblings?
I have an older brother.
Okay.
Yep, who's super easy.
Yeah.
Keith. He,
Yeah.
was an altar boy and
Yeah.
fireman, and got good grades, and
So the standard. Set
super
high.
reliable. Not snotty. No detentions.
Yeah.
If he played sports, and he's still easy.
Right.
He's still like he's a lot like my mom. He's just really passive.
Yeah.
Like nothing gets to him, nothing gets under his skin. He's always been one of my best friends. I don't think that we've ever had a true argument. I don't know how with me as a sibling, he's never taken the bait.
Not to jump ahead, but now as a mom, have you learned lessons? Because I think about that too. Like, if my daughters don't do well in school or they struggle, I'm like, I can't be the one that says, "Oh, well, you should be," because I remember how it was for me, and it's not always about grades. It's also,
I did. My parents didn't really push me. I think they just didn't know what to do with me, and they weren't really guided. Because there wasn't support for kids like me, so I think they just kind of figured, oh well, like D's are fine. And I went the opposite way with my kids, and I pushed them really hard. And just was all over them all the time to do their best, because I didn't want them to want to be invisible the way I always wanted to be invisible. I wanted them to push themselves and to learn that good can come from failure. And my middle two are on the spectrum. They're super high functioning, and were really well behaved. but I couldn't get them support because they weren't a threat to anybody. And it took probably 2 years of constant advocating to get them, because, you know, it's like a $20,000 process to have your kid identified. And I pushed and pushed and pushed and got it. And then they finally got support and did better. School was just kind of easy for my oldest and my youngest. I mean, they were in like 5th grade and reading at a 10th grade level, and just kind of, I mean, they had their ups and downs like all kids do. But my middle two struggled. And then when it was time for high school, all my kids have gone to tech. And they've done fantastically.
Someone said to me recently that we carry 7 generations of some type of pain and suffering, right? So in the instance, like, you know, it would be let's say my great-great-great-grandmother. Yep. I think I read something on 23andMe or something like that. Like, she was a maid and she stole from, you know, so she was probably in a bad situation. She had a child. That energy or that whatever was kind of present in that person, which becomes a part of you. And so and that's kind of interesting with your story. It's kind of like you try to stop the trend. You don't want, because it will, like, history does repeat itself.
Oh, unfortunately, yeah, it really does. And you know, I find that there's good things that don't get repeated, and there's bad things that do.
Right.
So that's hard. I just wanted my kids to have a better, and I didn't have a bad childhood. I mean, I didn't know what we didn't have. I didn't know that families didn't eat, you know, pancakes for dinner really frequently. And I didn't know that until I was older anyway, that like hand-me-downs weren't cool. And I didn't really ever notice that I was the only kid that didn't have a new bike and that sort of thing until I was older. And I think I wanted my kids to have stuff, but I wanted them to understand what went into getting that stuff. Like I didn't want them to go without. And I tried. Oh, here they come. Peace and quiet's over. That's the oyster boat sliding in. Yeah. So that's Jake, my stepson, and then we have a girl that her family has the little place up the street with the camper, so she works with him a couple days a week and keeps them in line.
What time did they go out?
Today was late. They didn't go out till 9 this morning because we had to drop off samples for the state this morning, and Kris and I were on a building job. So the whole schedule is a little wacky today. But
so you go through school, you have the horse, then did you say, hey, what's next after that?
Not really.
No?
I didn't think there was anything next for me.
Yeah.
I wasn't good enough to really continue riding. I mean, I didn't have the financial backing. And then, you know, by the time I finally got him, my horse, I was so tired that I didn't really love it anymore, which was a shame. I couldn't separate what I had finally earned from the exhaustion that it took to get there. So I finally achieved, and then I was like, I'm too tired. Like,
it kind of served its purpose, like your dad said, or your mom. Like that
right, like it kept me in line, and I did what I needed to do to get there, and then I wasn't as passionate about it anymore. And my horse had been through a lot, obviously, if I bought him on his way to the slaughterhouse. So I found a place up in Mass and just let him retire.
Nice.
So instead of selling him, I just sort of let him go off to greener pastures, and I like to pretend that he's still alive, even though he probably died 20 years ago.
You never checked, never went to, can't go back in the records. And what was the horse's name? Did you have
Killian. Yep, he was so cool. When I got him, he was really underweight, and he was really dull, and he was really, just didn't trust anybody, and I just groomed him constantly. Just always touching him and always talking to him and giving him,
Must have been therapeutic. Must have been,
For both of us.
Yeah.
I think we needed each other.
Yeah.
And we sort of helped each other become more confident and trusting, and then it was time he needed to just rest.
Yep.
He was done, and I was done. And
and how old were you around this time?
I was 18.
18.
Only had him for 2 years, and I had met my first husband at that point, and really thought, well, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not smart enough to go to college, and I don't love horses anymore, and I might as well just see where this takes me.
Yeah, right.
I never, through this whole journey until very recently, I never felt like I was in a position to control my own destiny, like my own path. I just always took what came my way. And so we dated very briefly, and you know, like always in the beginning, it's fantastic. And he proposed in 6 months.
Wow.
And you know, as a young person, I took that we were together every single day as a good thing. Like, oh, he just can't stand to be away from me. And I didn't read it as the beginning of a very controlling relationship. And we were set to get married 2 years later, and I knew it was a mistake. I just knew.
How quickly?
Pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did anyone, anyone give you kind of a, like,
no,
like something? You ever watch the shows, and there's like, you know, like I'm thinking of 2.5 Men is the first one that comes to mind, and someone, and you can just tell, like, they say one thing and there's something a little bit off, and you can tell something's going to be kind of off about that. Was it kind
I
of
think
like
they
that?
knew, but they didn't say anything because they knew how stubborn I was. And I think they just figured that I was, you know, going to do what I was going to do, and that was all there was to it. And like, even when the limo showed up that day, I was like, I got to get the fuck out of here.
Really?
Like, I can't.
Yeah.
This is bad.
What was it? Your gut was telling you?
Oh yeah, I didn't really even like him anymore at that point. Just there were so many little hints that were off, like just little things he'd say to me, and I think, wow, that makes me feel like shit.
Yeah.
But he didn't mean it, so that's
right.
fine. And you know, I would hold on to these little things, like he would be such a jerk, but then he would do one thing that was nice, and I would think, no, he wouldn't have done that nice thing if this was a mistake. So I just have to, you know, hold on to that nice thing.
Right.
And that's going to take me to the next little crumb that I'm going to get.
Yeah.
And we had our first when I was 22. And then that sort of seals the deal, doesn't it? I mean,
You feel a little trapped.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So now you can sort of blame all of the negativity on, well, we're not sleeping, or it's hormones, or, you know,
Right.
my oldest was a tough baby, so that was an easy
Way to kind
that was an easy way to like talk my way out of it. It's not him, it's the baby. And
Yeah.
I remember when my oldest Matt was born, I just remember how unsupported I felt. Like, I felt, all right, I just had this baby, but I really feel like I'm all by myself. You know, I was exhausted, like 13 hours of labor and an emergency cesarean, and he went out and got a pizza. And I was like, all right, it's me and Matt now.
Yeah.
And it was. And, you know, 14 months later, I had his twin brothers. And at that point, I was like, this is it.
But that's what I was going to ask you. What's that mentality? It's more, this is how it's just going to be. And
I loved being a mom.
Yeah.
All the love that I had given to horses, and that love of being needed, and that love of like a reciprocal relationship, and I'm going to show you affection and you're going to give me affection in return. I got that as a mom, and I just was so amazed by it. And I just wanted more kids. And
Right.
they were my buddies. And that was
Right.
actually like when I learned to read, was when I was reading to them.
Right. Okay.
I finally, as an adult, went to the eye doctor, and she said, wow, you have a really terrible case of, I guess, esotropia or amblyopia, or there's two that I can't remember now. So she gave me some like eye physical therapy exercises to do, and part of that was reading.
What was that
really
like
simple.
to be told after all this time? Like, no,
I was really mad.
Yeah.
I was really mad.
Yeah.
Because it could have been really simple.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Like, you could have changed everything
I
for
could've.
me. I could have gone to school. I could have done so many things.
Yeah. Which is
But
just knowing that simple thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy for everybody, and just because I couldn't do it, it doesn't mean I'm lazy, and it doesn't mean that I'm like disabled.
Yeah.
You know.
So what made you make that? I'm kind of curious about this. So what made you make that decision? Like, I'm going to do this now because you want to read to your kids.
Yeah.
And that's why you're like, I got to fix something's going on here.
Yeah, I
this
want to
is
read.
not-
I want to read.
Okay.
And they didn't make fun of me. So
True.
they didn't know I was reading the same line 6 times over, and
Right.
that I was changing some of the words, and that I was, stammering, and they didn't care that I was using my finger. And
Yeah. They just
I mean,
happen to be
now I
red, so-
read everything I can
Yeah.
get my hands on. I
Yeah.
can't read enough. I can't read online still. I have to print
Yeah.
everything out.
Yeah.
But I have like 3 books going.
Do you know?
Yeah.
I do that too, though. I try to read like on my screen. I'll get like an ebook, and I never finish it because I'm just. And then I
No.
end up ordering the paperback.
Yeah.
For it.
Yeah, I
and
want
it's
to
like-
feel it, and I can't. There's something about the glare on the screen that it makes it really difficult for me to pick up. I have really no depth perception.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm pretty clumsy and bang my head a lot, and which Kris thinks is hilarious. But I can't. That screen it's too one-dimensional, and when I have the book, I can kind of tilt it as I need
and
to.
see.
And
So you take this therapy. You go to this therapy, and they teach you like, hey, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
It's like a whole new.
yeah, I
world just
still
opens
read
up.
slowly,
Yeah.
but I read a lot.
Yeah.
And when I went back to school, I actually was able to get some accommodations, and they would send me. It was online, of course, because by that point I had 4 little ones, and they would send me the paper copies of all of my books, not like hardcovers, but it was like packets.
Yeah.
And I just like devoured everything.
Yeah.
And I was on the dean's list my very first semester.
Yeah. Wow.
So
amazing.
and like couldn't write enough and couldn't read enough, and
Yeah.
just like it was like this wild experience.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
holy shit.
It's like a whole new world.
Yeah, like I'm not
Opens up.
dumb.
Yeah.
Holy shit, I'm not dumb.
And I think that's, and I keep going back to me, but I feel like that was the thing. It's just like I never felt smart.
Right.
And then I'll never forget. I went to college. I really applied myself in economics. I decided I'm going to actually study for this. I took the test and I passed it. I was like, I can't
Wow.
believe it. When
That's
you
amazing.
actually, apply yourself and you have confidence to do it, but when I always feel like that's what's wrong with school a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
There's like, it's either if you naturally have the brains to do it,
Right.
you're rewarded. And then if you don't, you're kind of like, your
Right.
confidence gets kicked quite
Right.
a bit,
Yeah, I think kids get it when they get it, and you're not going to make a kid get it before they're ready.
Right.
And I think as adults, like so often we have these moments of like, oh, I get that now.
Right.
So why is it any different for a kid?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And when the kids around you are getting it and they're having that like aha moment and you're still not, it's like, oh shit, what's wrong with me?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Like, so I just won't go to class, or
Right.
I just won't.
And the parents don't know too. Like I said, my parents didn't. They try to help me. They help me with the homework, but it's not. You're
Yeah.
at school a lot more doing the work than you are with your parents trying to tell
yeah.
you can do this, and then you have the other pressures of, especially now, I'm sure it's 10 times worse because I think when I was just graduating, that's when the iPhones were starting to come out.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But I mean, even now, it's going to be extremely tough, and just
Yeah.
the confidence.
Yeah, I can remember my dad's really good friend was a math teacher in another town, and he's the nicest guy. I mean, just such a sweetheart, but he's tough. And I can just remember sitting at our kitchen table in our little apartment and crying and crying and crying because I couldn't understand. Like, no matter how he broke it down for me, I couldn't understand fractions or decimals or anything. And there was nothing he was going to say or do that was going to help me. And it was just like torture.
Yeah.
Like I can't do it. I can't understand. Kris has finally taught me how to, handle fractions and decimals, and I just wasn't ready to get it yet. I mean,
Right.
I just wasn't.
That's why, like, there's things I'm reading now that I really didn't take seriously in high school. Like, I like to read a lot more. I like to learn more
Yeah.
about economics and
Right.
law and all. Where
Right.
I actually took classes on this, and I could
Right.
care less back in the
Yeah.
day.
I want to know everything there is to know about everything.
Yeah.
I never want to be done learning.
Yeah.
If I had the time and the money to go back to school, I would do it right now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I wish so much that I was able to continue,
Right.
but I was not in a supportive place, and so I think my ex-husband kind of saw that I was getting really confident, and that I had gone back to work at this point, just in the local school system, and I did, you know, like I was a special ed helper, and I really liked the kids that had behavior issues, and so I worked really hard with those kids, and I got really good at it, and I was really I was like sought after for the first time in my whole life. Like people were looking for me because it was like, go get Beth, she can handle that, and that had never happened to me before. And that in addition to working with these amazing women who were like, no, you can do it. Like, we'll help you. You can, you know, at lunchtime, we're going to get on the computer and we're going to help you find a school and narrow down coursework and look into FAFSA for your loan. And, you know, they got me on this roll, and I started, and I just like became a different person. And so after the first year and a half, he was like, well, I'm going to go back to school now, and we can't both go. So you're going to be done, and I'm going to go. And what do you do?
And it was just more of a, because you're doing it, it wasn't coincidence. It was just more.
Oh no,
like
he was going to be a nurse.
Yeah, yeah, out of
which
the
is
blue.
Hilarious. Yeah. And what do I say to that? We can't both afford to go, and I make very little money, and I can't afford this house without him, because by that time we had built a house, and you know, he covered my health insurance, and you know, 4 kids at that point, and I was 30, and what could I?
And was it still that little like bad good thing? He does a good thing. Is it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like
always...
I'm a total asshole, but I'm going to throw you a surprise 30th birthday party, but I'm going to go out with my girlfriend after. You know, it was just like constant. Looking back now, I don't know how I didn't just kill myself.
Yeah.
You know, it was like I never knew what I was going to do wrong. I just was always waiting to get yelled at. And the funny thing is that people who knew me, because I've always been like a strong person. People would never believe what I was living through, and so I didn't tell anybody.
Did he always appear normal around?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's, you know, he was always on his phone, but everybody was at that point because they were new. It was a novelty. Not particularly friendly. Like I like to be around people, and he would just always be like completely introverted and not talking to anybody. And so I was just kind of like put up a good front. You know, everything's fine. We're good.
Right.
See, he got me that pretty jewelry, and you know, he bought me those pretty flowers. They're in my garden right now, and you know, so I made sure people saw the good stuff, and then I just took the bad stuff. But you know, it was like he worked third shift, and I had 4 kids under the age of like 8 at that point. We couldn't make any noise all day. The house had to be silent all day. They couldn't have friends over. I never knew when the facade was going to crack. So I remember the twins wanted to have they were in separate classes, and I think it was like their 7th birthday, and they wanted to have all their friends, all their classmates at their birthday party. And so I came up with the good idea of, because I mean, my husband made good money. I just never saw any of it.
Yeah.
So to me, like, and he made a lot, but we didn't have a lot. And I still don't know where it went.
That money went.
No idea.
Yeah.
And so I thought, good cheap present or a good cheap party idea was to do a field day birthday party. And so we went to the local school playground, and we had a mega field day. And my husband was there, of course, and one of my older son's friend threw a water balloon at him, and it hit him. And he absolutely lost his mind and started screaming and swearing, and I thought I can never have their friends around him again. That's it. Never again. Because I wouldn't send my kids to play at a house with that lunatic.
Right.
And there were some parents there.
Right.
I was mortified. And then it was like instantly, it's, do I go to the kids or do I go and start kissing his ass so he'll stop screaming?
Right.
I just never knew what to say, what to do, what was going to set him off. I didn't know if I was going to get screamed at. I didn't know if I was going to get the silent treatment. I didn't really know which was worse. When he started drinking heavily, then it became physical. There were some pretty scary fights. Like, he was out completely drunk, and the kids were. We built our house next to my parents' house, and he came home absolutely drunk, and he kept grabbing me. He was pulling my arms across my chest and back, and I was having a hard time breathing. And I remember I just tried to throw him down the stairs because I was upstairs, and I kept trying to throw him down the stairs, and I got him away from me, and I jumped down and I jumped into his truck to leave, and he came down and he grabbed me by my collar, and he was trying to drag me out of the truck. And it was my first smartphone, like not a flip phone.
Yeah.
And I just started smashing him over the head with it to get away. And he was bald. His whole head was shredded. But the next day, and he left, and I went and I stayed at my parents' house. And he came back, and he went over and he started slamming on all their windows and doors. And I said, I have to go home. And my mom said, you're not going back. And I said, no, I have to. And then he went around to the side of the house and he started ripping down my dad's wood pile, which my dad at that point that's a whole other story, but my dad was hit by a truck when he was a volunteer fireman.
Oh, wow.
When he was 50. And so we would get him set up in a chair to stack his wood.
Yeah.
And so it was days to do a little bit.
It was a process, yeah.
And he went and he just ripped it all down. And so I did go home. And
so when all this is going on, let's use the analogy, you're in a prison. Did you ever?
Absolutely.
Did you ever feel like, was there a couple, you see the movies where they try to make the attempt and maybe they're not successful of getting out?
Yeah, I did.
So you try to make that move a couple times?
I did. The biggest move I made was he was obviously cheating on me. He wasn't hiding it. I would go to work every day, and she would come to my house, and my dad would watch her go in the house and stay there while I was at work, and then she would leave before I would get home. My ex-husband he needed to have a new truck. He was a spender, and I was not, and I had to sell my Suburban. I had an old Suburban that I loved. I had to sell that to pay a couple months of the mortgage after he bought this truck he couldn't afford. And so we were down to one car. And so I was not allowed to drive myself to work, just in case he needed anything while I was gone. I only worked half days, like he could have planned around it. So he would come home from third shift, drive me to work, and then he would nap, and then he would come and get me. So if I wasn't home and I didn't have a car, he knew he was safe.
Right.
And didn't have any trouble parading this hag in front of my poor father, who's stuck in the house because he's disabled.
Yeah.
And so I thought something was off, but you only let yourself go so far with that.
Right.
And he invited her to our house to watch the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, well, whatever. Maxie. Maxie.
Oh, you looking for mom?
Hi, Buppy. So he cooked all day. Max. He cooked all day, and I was like, wow, he's really into the Super Bowl shit. And she came over with her daughter, and she kept saying things like, I I can't believe your dogs are so happy that I'm here. I've never met them before. And I was like, all right, relax. They like everybody. Like, you're nobody special.
Right.
And then she was like, where's your bathroom? I don't know where your bathroom is. And I was like, you walked right by it, stupid. I didn't like her, but like, whatever. They're friends from the gym, so.
Yeah.
Whatever. I didn't like him either, so I didn't, you know, I only cared so much. And,
but what made you not break out of the...
I tried.
Yeah.
So I found out shortly after that, my dad called me next door and he said, I have to tell you something and you're going to be really upset. And I said, okay. Mm-hmm. And he just started to cry. And he said that skank who was at your house the other night, she's here every day when you're at work. And I said, okay. And then I got my phone and I called him and I said, you can come get your shit off the front lawn. Yeah. I'm all done. Yeah. And were
you surprised or were you kind of...
No, because I never trusted him. I mean, he was the kind of guy who every new female employee that he, like every new coworker, that was like the only name I would hear. And he just was like so impressed by everybody but me. And at that point, I kind of thought, I'm nobody special. So whatever. And I wanted him gone. And I got a restraining order because he was acting erratically. And
how old are your kids around this time?
Chelsea was in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Because I remember one of the other moms said, is everything okay? Because Chelsea said that she had to stay home from school to help her parents break up. And he would go after me right in front and he didn't hide anything. Yeah. So they always knew, like my oldest would get between us when he was screaming at me, you know, or he would bang on the door and try to get in while I was getting screamed at. And sorry, this is so weird to think of this like particular time in my life because it feels like it never happened.
Right.
But I stayed.
Yeah.
As I thought, where do I
go?
How do I pay for this house? How do I, how do I function? And you know, I spoke to a lawyer and they said, you can't cut him out no matter what you do and no matter whether he's cheated or not. That doesn't matter. He still is going to have 50% say in everything you do with the kids and where you live and when you're stuck with somebody who's so contrary and is going to purposely do the opposite of what you know is right for your kids.
Right. Yeah.
So I stayed.
Yeah.
And then I decided I'm just not going to have feelings anymore. Like, this is my life, and for the foreseeable future, I don't have feelings anymore. And so that was my new focus. I wasn't in school anymore. So my focus was on, I didn't have feelings. So that was like how I
got through it.
Yeah, like all the determination.
If I can't feel it, then I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I just won't have feelings anymore. And so all of the energy that I had put into horses and motherhood and school was now channeled into not having feelings anymore.
Would you say that was probably your darkest time?
Oh God, yeah, it was awful.
Yeah,
it was awful. And then it got progressively worse. I mean, he wasn't even trying to hide anything. I knew that this person who he had sworn he would never see again, he was still seeing. Because they were such good friends. Couldn't possibly cut her out of his life.
That takes some person to bring that person over too.
Oh yeah, it was like a slap in the face. Like, look how stupid you are. You don't even know what's going on. And I remember he was always like super dad when this person was around, and I was always like, who the fuck are you? Like, what do you, like during the Super Bowl halftime show, he was like dancing with Chelsea, and I was like,
this is not.
Have we met? Like, why aren't you on your phone like you always are? Like, you don't even talk and you're dancing with her? So I knew. And then I don't even know how many there were after that or if it was just always her still. But I just didn't give a shit
But you
anymore.
always just have what's best for your kids during that
Oh yeah,
situation, right? It doesn't
absolutely.
matter, whatever, it's
No, I
over,
lived for them.
yeah,
I
yeah.
lived for them, and I had Dana, who was my best friend from the time I was 18, and she was my constant sounding board. And she was the only one that had any inkling of how bad things were, but I was never honest with her completely.
How come?
Because you can only hear you should just leave so many times. And then
Yeah.
it's like, I can't fucking leave.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
It's 4 restraining orders I've had by the time I left.
Right. Right.
And I was only able to leave because I came here.
Right.
Because it was safe in a private
Right.
road. And legally, he had no right to be on the street.
Right.
And Kris is scary.
Yeah.
So that was the only reason I could leave.
Yeah.
I mean, everything had to be so perfectly orchestrated. It just wasn't time.
Right.
So I just lived, I lived as a single person without the ability to be with anyone else.
Yeah.
So I cut myself off completely from any sort of like emotions that weren't related to my children.
Right. Yeah.
And just didn't have them anymore.
Yeah.
And that was
How long did that go? That's
years.
Yeah.
That was probably 6 years. 7 years maybe.
Yeah.
And I think the only hitch in that plan was that I could not stop the feelings when it came to Kris. He was like my kryptonite. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't. And I met him when I was still married, and Jake was my student,
Okay.
and he would come in for meetings, and I thought, my God, this is the cutest man I've ever met. And I knew Jake's mom had passed.
Yeah.
The second day I met Jake, he called me we were in a behavior classroom. So we had like an office space in the back it had windows, but we had them blocked out in case
Yeah.
the kids needed to have a moment.
Sure.
You know, because I was always, and I still am, a huge believer in that people deserve dignity no matter what space they're in.
Yeah.
And so when a kid needed to have a moment, that's just where we went. And he called me back there one day and he told me about his mom. And then after that, he started asking me to be his mom. That was when he was in 6th grade.
Wow.
And Kris was dating someone. And, you know, he always described it as Jake's mom was his person.
Yeah.
And after she passed, he just always thought, you know, I had that once, and
Right.
if I don't get it again, then I don't get it again. But
Right.
I'm lucky to have had it once. And he really thought that Jake needed 2 parents, and
Yeah.
so I would see them at meetings, and I always sort of wondered what that was about because I couldn't see them together. They were very different people. But I just was so out of my mind over Kris. I just thought I was so drawn to him. And so when Jake would mention him, I would just it would like be this little nugget that I would hold on to in my brain. And I could distract myself just by like the mention of Kris. And
Yeah.
I hooked my sons up with Jake because I thought they're gonna like this kid.
Yeah.
And they did. They were friends right away. And so I was always back and forth bringing the boys here. And
Yeah.
I would never have Jake at our house. Number
Yeah.
one, it's not appropriate
Right.
for the working relationship
Working.
that we had, but also I was afraid that he would see what
So yeah, I was
the
about to say
boys.
during this time, everything's kind of still status quo, right? Like
Yeah,
everything's
just living around my ex-husband,
Yeah.
going through the motions,
yeah.
just taking whatever shit got dumped on me and
Yeah.
moving on with it, and
Yeah.
normalized everything, normalized not being able to open the mail, normalized never having any money, normalized having to call the mortgage company every month and beg for mercy so that they didn't take my house. Normalized begging the financiers to not take his truck that he had to have that we couldn't afford. It was my life. So whatever, you know, it sucked.
It's more than
but
whatever,
it was,
but it's
it was my life and I had to deal with it, but I had these 4 beautiful children and I was making friends, and I had a job I was good at, and yeah, I liked getting up in the morning. You know, he would come home in the morning as I was getting ready to leave, and I knew if I could just get through that 20 minutes of like, what's the mood going to be? I would try to be upstairs getting ready while he was in the kitchen, and then we would just switch places. Yeah. And you know, like he would do stupid stuff, like he'd open the cabinet, and if the Tupperware fell out, he would just rip it all out and throw it all across the floor, and then kick it.
And he wanted to stay married because, like, didn't he look at this situation?
I don't know. I think because it looked good, it was fun to post his kids on social media and say, look at what a great little family we are, and get women to say, oh, you're such a good dad.
Yeah.
You know, right. It was all about appearances.
Right.
Nobody knew what a piece of shit he was.
Yeah.
I don't think he still knows what a piece of shit he is.
Yeah.
I think if you reached out to him, he would probably say we left on good terms and that we're friends. And
whatever it takes for that person to
if
feel.
If you don't like history, you just rewrite it.
Right.
And when you live in that place that you can justify it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
I believe what I believe, and I believe I was a great dad, and we just didn't. You know, he would probably say we just grew apart.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit.
Yeah, doesn't matter whatever story he wants to tell himself.
Yeah, whatever you need to tell yourself, buddy.
Yeah,
I mean, you know.
So when do you start making this kind of transition? Like there's light coming at the end of this tunnel.
It was one day, and I dropped the boys off here. I thought I was dropping them off here to go fishing with Kris. And he said, why don't you come? And I thought, I can't. I said, I'm not dressed for it. I didn't know what to say. Like, what do I can't, like, what? He's not going to want to hang out with me. I mean, he's so great. Like, what does he want to hang out with me for? He must feel bad for me. It was never because I was worth hanging out with or, you know.
But you've been through so much. That's
the
only thing you can think in your mind.
Such a nothing, you know.
Yeah.
So if I let it get past, you know, just the giggles behind the scenes, then I was taking a big risk.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, what the hell? And I went, and I just, like, I don't know how to describe it. It was like I was absorbing his presence. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I just knew that in whatever capacity, I needed to be near him. And I felt alive. And I felt, I mean, it was really scary because I thought I've worked way too hard to not have feelings. I can't quit now. Like this is, like I'm setting myself up for a huge fall. Yeah. That I couldn't afford emotionally. Like I couldn't take another big hit. So I had to stop before it started. But I couldn't. Like I remember he's like, come sit with me, and I remember sitting next to him in the bridge on the boat, and I remember putting my hand near his, and I looked down, and I wanted so much to take his hand. Or even just for like our pinkies to touch, like that would have been enough. But I just couldn't. I thought, I can't. This is nuts. Like he's going through a divorce, and I'm married to this lunatic, and I just can't. Like just don't do it.
But it took everything in your power not to.
Oh my God! It was like trying not to breathe.
Yeah.
It was just like this. I don't even have words for it. He thinks it's hilarious because he's like, oh, just me. And I didn't know, like I knew his marriage was floundering because my boys would come home and say, God, she just like screamed at him all day, and I couldn't wait for you to pick us up. And
but it was that day.
It was that day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, how do I insert myself into his life? And so my boys would oyster with him, and I think I said to him, why don't you just text me when you need the boys, and I'll make sure that I can get them to you. And so he would text me, and I would it was like, can you have the boys here at 8 o'clock on Saturday? And I would just like read the text over and over and over and over and over, like a lifeline. And then, I remember I came to pick them up one day, and they were sitting having pizza, and they were planning a fishing trip. And I was feeling really ballsy, and I said, well, is it boys only, or can I go? And he said, absolutely, you can go.
Yeah.
And I thought, all right, that was a mistake. That was really stupid.
Where'd that come from?
Yeah, like what? Stuff that back in
that
right away.
Came flying out.
Like, fuck. Like, so stupid.
Yeah.
And I went, and I just was more and more frequent. And then I started going oystering. And I was like, all right, this is getting really out of control. And so I would by that time, I was in, and I thought, I'm going to test this. I want to see if this is going to go anywhere. And I had been at dinner at Dana's house, and I had a few drinks, and I came here and made a move. And that was it.
And then, how'd that feel, though, for something?
It was terrifying.
But did it feel like you felt, I don't want to use the word justified,
He was
but
like, yeah. He was divorced by this point, and it was like the night before his divorce was final. And I didn't give a shit anymore.
Yeah. You couldn't hold those feelings back as much as you wanted to be emotionless.
No, and I was like, I just can't. Jake was out of town, and I was like, fuck it.
Yeah.
I've had a few drinks, and
yeah.
I felt, you can feel, when there's a connection, and as you're talking, you start to talk closer and closer and closer. And,
yeah. But all these years not having that.
Yeah.
Even that alone doesn't even have to be the physical connection. It's just the...
Yeah, like he's actually looking at me when I'm talking.
Right.
And that was bizarre to me because I was so foreign. And I thought, well, now what? I mean, and so we continued that way.
Yeah.
And had a physical relationship, and of course I'll have to ask him if it's okay if I said this, but
we can always this is what the editing magic's for, right, Ed?
Yep.
Right?
Now you know a mistake.
we can,
slutty.
No. No. We're gonna have people now listening in the car, like cranking the volume, like, what happened?
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. Get the microphone close.
Yeah. Oh.
No, yeah.
I'm skanky. So I thought, all right, well, this can go on. This is cool. I'm okay with this because I don't have feelings. So this is just going to be fun because I can control this. I can do this.
Yeah.
And I kind of, at this point, I had started giving him little snippets, like of things that were happening, and he would say, what do you mean? He says, you can't do something. I'm like, well, I can't.
Yeah.
He told me I can't. And he's like, but that doesn't make sense. And I was like, no, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That is bullshit. Yeah. And so he kind of like gave me almost like permission to push back. And so I remember the big one was he needed somebody to go to Maryland and get oyster gear. And so there was someone that we both went to school with that was around town then, and he sent us to get the oyster gear. It was a girl. And so I got home and I said, I'm going to Maryland on Tuesday, like overnight, and then I'll be back Wednesday. And he said, no, you're not. And I said, actually, yeah, I am. And I was like shaking when I did it. And then I was like, I got to get out of here because I just did something really naughty.
Yeah.
And I came here and I said I was going. And he was like, well, good.
Yeah.
So you're going.
Yeah.
And I felt so ballsy.
Yeah.
And it's so silly now looking back, like, well, it's like 40 years old. Like, I can fucking do what I want.
But it meant everything at the time.
But at the time, it was like, I might as well have said, I'm going to kill your mother. I mean, it was like that bad.
That kind of, yeah.
And so from there, I just started pushing and finally, I said, I need you to, he was like following me. So he knew I was coming here.
Yeah.
Under the guise of oystering. And I did. I would come here every Saturday and I
Yeah.
would like shake the whole way here.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I was so excited.
Yeah.
Like I would be like driving
Yeah.
and shaking and
Yeah.
like giggling the whole way here. And
Yeah.
Kris and I would have coffee and then we'd jump on the boat and we'd oyster all day. And, you know, he would hand me something and his arm would brush my arm and it was like
The best.
amazing. And,
Yeah.
or I'd have like shit on my cheek and he'd wipe it off and I'd be like, no, do that. You missed some. Do it again.
A little more.
Yeah, a little lower.
Yeah.
And so my ex was on to me, and I kind of didn't care at that point. And so he would do little things like, I don't know, he just was asking me all the time, like, if he could come oystering. Like he wanted to get in on this new little friendship that I had, and
Yeah.
I kept making excuses, like, you won't like it, it's outside, and
Yeah.
you know, I'm just helping out. They don't, you know, I'm just, it's not really fun. I'm just there to help because the boys, you know, it's less work for the boys because our boys were still doing it at the time. And
Yeah. Yeah.
totally downplaying how much I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I just was so unhappy and we were fighting a lot. And I said, you know what, I need space and I need you to leave for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I had said I want out. Finally, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this
It's kind
anymore.
of like you're here enjoying your life. You're
Yeah, and
happy.
then
Why am I going back
right.
here?
And so Kris was like, just be honest. Like, tell him you're done. And I kind of felt safe because I had, you know, this person in my corner, and Kris and I weren't even like an item at that point. It was just time spent together, and it's so hard to tell all this, not emotionally. I mean, it's hard emotionally, but like it's so confusing now looking back at it because it doesn't make sense to me. And so I feel like I'm getting the timing wrong, and that it didn't really happen because all of it is so outrageous.
Everything you went through.
Yeah,
Well, I think the mind does. I think the mind will.
Bizarre.
I think the body does everything to protect yourself from
Right.
everything. So it'll, you know,
So
do what it has to do.
I mean, I may be mixing things up, but the meat and potatoes is that I asked him to leave.
Yeah.
And he left for a couple weeks. And it was the most incredible 2 weeks I had had.
Years.
And I remember, like, the first day, the kids and I ran around slamming doors and, like, shouting and ringing the doorbells, and because we could make noise.
Yeah.
And we were like, we had the dogs barking, and we had the television on loud, and we had music going, and, like, they would just run upstairs, slam a door, and come down.
Yeah.
It's just so dumb. But it
But
was
it
like,
was-
holy shit, we can live in our house for a change. Like, we're not afraid.
Yeah.
And he was okay for that 2 weeks. Like, he gave me space.
Yeah.
And then it was Halloween, and he came back here. It was a Saturday. I was working, and he showed up here, which was really strange because he normally wouldn't come here because he didn't like Kris at all. And openly admitted that he would not ever fuck with Kris. Kris is a big guy. Kris is a strong guy, and not somebody that a lot of people would screw around with. And he showed up, and he parked at the end of the driveway, and he just stood there. And Kris said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, I have to know what's happening. And he said, "Do you want me to go with you?" And I said, "No, I'm okay." So Kris stayed back and just watched. And he said, "It's my house. I'm moving back in, and you're going to stay." And I said, "But I don't understand. You said that you were going to help me. Like, you said you were going to give me space and time and healing." And he said, "Well, my lawyer says it's my house, and I'm moving back in." So he had already consulted a lawyer, which I didn't know was happening. And I said, "Okay, then I'm going to leave." And he said, "You don't have anywhere to go." And I said, "I'll find a place." And he said, "Well, you're not taking the kids." And I didn't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I remember I just walked back to Kris, and I sat on the bottom step, and I just cried and cried and cried and cried. And the boys would walk by and like side eye me, and Kris would just sort of shoo them away. And I think I sobbed for an hour.
Yeah.
And then I came up here and he said, you need a hot shower. And so we took a hot shower and I cried in the shower. I was so tired.
Yeah.
And
do you think that was like your tipping point, so to speak?
yeah,
like,
it was. I was done.
Yeah.
I didn't know how I was going to be done. I didn't know where I was going to go.
But you were finally getting there.
But I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
I would rather die right now.
Yeah.
And I said that to Kris. I would rather die than go back.
Yeah.
And I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. And then I got into dry clothes that Kris gave me, and we got into bed and napped. I just slept.
Yeah.
And slept and slept. And, you know, I knew the youngest was safe with him at that point because she got him a lot of attention and she was easy. You know, she wasn't talking back, and she still doesn't. I mean, so I knew she was okay. The boys were here with me at that point that day, and Kris just told them she just needs to rest. It's okay. And I went back, and I just stopped. It was like every movement. It was like every movement I made, every step I took was through quicksand. I was so tired. Everything was, to make food for the kids, it was exhausting. To get dressed, it was exhausting. I couldn't talk, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. And Kris said, you're gonna come here. And I said, I don't understand what that means. And he said, it was, you know, the end of studio season. And he said, I don't have any tenants after November 4th. He said, you're going to come here. And he said, the boys can be upstairs if they want. And Chelsea can be downstairs with you. But you're going to stay here until we figure this out. And he said, it's a private road. He can't get to you. Because he was following me.
Yeah.
I would be I worked at different schools in the district for the position that I had. And I would be like at one school and he would shoot me a text saying, how come you're not at the elementary school? I thought you were going to be at the elementary school today. Or, wow, that's a new dent on your car. Or just enough. And,
Just
you know,
to
he
play those mind games with you.
Oh, yeah. And he was so good at it, you know. I mean, he knew how to play a restraining order like a fiddle.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah.
Really successfully. And the last restraining order I got, I came here. And, you know, they expire. You can't. The state of Connecticut doesn't do a great job protecting women. I don't know what they need to do differently. So I'm not suggesting that I have like a master plan. But I was able to get him to let me take Chelsea here. I said, you don't want to deal with a teenage girl going through puberty. I said, I'm not leaving forever. I just need some time. I left everything behind. I like packed a bag. And just like I packed a dresser and just very few things. And, you know, I made it seem like I was going to come back. Like I just needed a little bit of space. And I'm so mixed up timing wise. Like I know at some point during that time, he had texted Kris and said, stay the fuck away from my wife. And then like a day later, texted him begging for help to get me back. And I know,
everywhere.
like it's such a shit sandwich that I'm having so much trouble.
No, but because it's so much, and half the time you don't want to remember it either.
No,
right?
no. If I had to write it down, I don't know that I could.
Good, yeah.
I just know in the moment how I felt. Like like it's making me feel the things I felt, but I can't put them in order.
Yeah.
And so the Saturday I moved in here, Kris was out oystering for the day, and Chelsea was with me. And that night I was supposed to go to a cousin's wedding. And we were together when I had RSVP'd. And the Friday before, Kris and I had gone up or down to Westbrook to get a part for the boat. And so he was calling me, as I had sent him a message saying, just so you know, you're not invited to this wedding. Your meal has been canceled. My uncle and aunt have been told you're not coming, that we're taking a break. I'm going by myself. And the entire ride to Westbrook, I had him on speakerphone. And he just kept saying, so am I picking you up or do you want me to meet you there? And I would say, you're not going. Well, they're my family too, so I'll meet you there. And it was just like this loop. And Kris kept saying, hang up. But I was like, no, you need to hear this. Like, this is my life. This is, he just wears you down till you get what you want. To get gets what he wants. And
it's crazy.
I showed up alone at that wedding. And everybody was like, you're alone? And I said, I'm alone, and I'm going to stay that way.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, it's about fucking time.
I was about to say, they
were like, thank fucking God.
Yeah.
And I had said, you can show up, but you won't be there long, because there's a lot of people there that are going to help you back to your car.
Yeah.
And he didn't show up, luckily.
Yeah. How'd that make you feel, knowing that?
Liberated.
Yeah.
Like strong.
Yeah.
Safe.
Yeah.
Justified.
Yeah.
Not crazy.
Yeah.
Because everything, you're made to feel crazy every time you're upset by something. It's like...
Because if someone tells you the same thing over and over and over and over...
Right. Like, I was crazy for being upset that he was cheating on me. I was crazy for being pissed off that he had a secret bank account that he was dumping all of our money into when I was begging the mortgage lender to not take our house.
Right.
So it was like, well, I only have to do this because you're A, B, and C.
Right.
And he heard enough, and you're like, all right, well, yeah, I really fucking suck, don't I?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was like, it was just such a strange experience. And then shortly after that, found out that my grandmother, who was just such a huge part of my life, was dying. And she was one of those people that just was never going to die. She's going to outlive all of us.
I know what you mean.
And she was 93.
Yeah.
And she, on my mom's side, there's like a group of us ladies, and we're really tight. And she was just sort of like the glue that held us all together. And so we still are this really strong little lady group. But she was so important, and she still is, but she was so much more than a grandmother, and a friend and a sister and a mom. And she was just like, I don't know, I don't have a word to describe the relationship that we shared together. But she was the person for my twins. They don't have like big emotions, and they don't hug, and they don't say I love you, but they hug her, and they always hugged her, and they always kissed her, and they always said I love you to her, and they always had to be right next to her and cuddling with her. And so that was a big one. That was like, Mom left Dad, and Greet is dying, and Dad is telling us that you're a cokehead, and Dad is telling us that you're a whore, and Dad is telling us that you're a bad person, and that you abandoned us. And it was just such a
horrible.
Yeah,
horrible.
When I was preparing for this, I felt like I was prepared, and I felt like I had words.
No.
And I don't. Like, this is going to be the most boring interview you've ever had, because I'm like, the whole time.
This is, because I'll be honest with you, like, you telling the story, and if you notice, I would say, yeah, too, this is probably the least I've ever had to talk in an interview, which I love. Because
It's funny. Kris is like, you talk a lot. They're going to know everything about you in like 2 seconds.
I feel like I've been in the story the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I've been there, like, watching it. Like, I'm not, you ever, like, we talk about when you read a book and you kind of, and then you go watch the movie and you're like, oh, the house doesn't look exactly how I thought. Like that, I don't know what your house looked like, but I'm there.
All right, well,
like,
that's cool. I'm sorry to put you there.
No,
this is a shitty place to be.
No, but still, like, when you talked about the Tupperwares being thrown, like, I could see.
Oh, yeah, kicking it like a baby.
Yeah,
like, you big, fat, fucking asshole baby.
Yeah.
That's what your kids are going to see before they get on the school bus.
Right.
Not, bye, guys, love you, have a good day.
Right.
You kicking the Tupperware because you can't find the lid you want.
Yeah.
Really? That's the biggest problem you have.
Yeah.
So I don't think so.
Yeah. No, but this is so.
So it just.
So when does the official? So you went through the process. You weren't sure like how to.
That was
how
November.
To make the split. Yeah. So what happened?
And I was just done.
Yeah.
I said, "Don't come to the funeral. Don't come to the wake." He was there, at both, sitting up front, with my boys. Like the proud papa.
Yeah.
You know, greeting people.
The family wasn't there with pitchforks or tried to.
They wanted to be.
But they don't want to make a scene either.
They didn't really know. They knew he was a dick.
But
they didn't know what I had been
was.
through.
Yeah.
By this time, I had gone. What was it? My first night with Kris was August 17th. My birthday is the 18th, and I was an hour and a half late to my own birthday party because I was out on the boat with Kris. And I was like, ooh, engine trouble. I'm like, oh, no engine trouble. I just didn't want to be away from him for a single second. And the next day, I was at my parents' house, and my mom said, what's going on? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, are you in love with Kris? And I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
And she said, is he in love with you? And I said, I don't care. I really don't care.
You're happy.
I need to soak this up for as long as I can, for however long it lasts.
Right.
'Cause I didn't think it was going to last.
Right.
You know, I was totally convinced he was going to find somebody better.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't going to take, look, you know, what am I? Like, nothing. And he's a real damsel in distress magnet, which I am not, I will say right now. I would rather break my arms and legs than take help from someone.
Yeah.
And they all make fun of me for it, and I still don't give a shit.
Right.
And I thought, somebody's going to swoop in here, and this is going to be done. And so every time we were together, it was like, if this is the last time, then it's okay. And I thought, I have to either... There was a point where I was like, I have to stop coming around, or I have to be okay with the fact that to be in his life is going to mean watching him with someone else. And I thought, all right, well, I've done it before. Like, I can do this. I can just stop having feelings. And
so even after all this, you're still kind of...
I just couldn't. I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't not be near him. I have to be in his orbit. And so if it means that I have to suffer and watch him with someone else, then I just will. But I need to be near him.
Yeah.
I need to hear his voice. I need to feel his presence. And when my grandmother was dying, I remember I had gone. I had to go to my parents' house because that's where she passed. She had hospice care at my parents' house, and I slammed the studio door. He was trying to talk to me. I was so angry, and I said, I have to go. And I slammed the door, and I left. And I went, and I curled up in the hospital bed with my grandmother and just cuddled. And it was the last time I saw her. She wasn't talking. But I said, I love you. And I think she said, I love you. Because she made a sound that sounded like I love you. And I knew that was the last time I was going to see her, because I didn't want to see her again after that, which is selfish.
I know. No, I can relate.
But I came home, and I came upstairs. I got settled and took a shower. I came upstairs, and because I was spending most nights up here with Kris.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what happened? Why were you angry? And I said, I can't tell you. And he said, why? And I said, because it will ruin everything. And he said, how could it ruin anything? And I said, I can't tell you. And he said, I really thought that we were, close enough that you could tell me anything. And I just waited a minute, and I said, I'm in love with you. And you don't, he said, but why is that bad? Like, how would that ruin anything? And I said, because you're not in love with me. And he said, but how do you know that? And I said, I just know you're not. This is just like, we're just killing time here. Like, this isn't going to be anything. And he said, I can't say that I'm in love with you, but it's not nothing. And he just like totally folded me in. And I mean, there was no going back at that point. And then that was that. I don't know how I kept going, through that, but I did. And she passed, and he was there for me. And it was the same funeral home where his wife had her wake, and it was really difficult for him, and he did that for me. He went for me, and that was so important. I felt so supported and loved, and by this point, my ex knew I wasn't coming back. And so we had agreed that we were going to go through like mediation. We were going to, his big thing was like, our marriage was a disaster, so let's get divorced like civilized adults. And I thought, wow, that's not like you, but okay.
Yeah.
And so I gave up my search for a lawyer, and I made myself totally vulnerable again to trusted him. And the next day I was served with divorce papers. So he made sure that I didn't do anything to protect myself. And then he served me with papers. And it was game on after that. And so I moved in. And I put it out there. And when I realized that he wasn't, when you're with somebody who makes you feel disposable for 20 years, and makes you feel like you could be replaced at any time for any reason, it's really hard to understand what it is to be accepted. And I didn't get it for a long time, but right after I told Kris how I felt, he started helping me to feel safe. And I realized, all right, well, maybe he's not going to replace me this week, so maybe I can rest a little bit. And so I was so tired.
Mentally, that's going to be draining.
And so it's like, little by little, I would start to let myself go. And then in February, he went to Costa Rica. So the guy that we bought the farm from and his wife, I'm strangling myself with this thing.
That might be a first.
Yep. I'm not upset. They had a place in Costa Rica. And so he went to hang out with them for, I think, 2 weeks. And he said, I'm going to go. And I said, all right, it's fine. You deserve it. He was newly divorced, and I was on my way there. And if anybody deserves a break, it's Kris, because he's the hardest working human I've ever met. Like, he's just never still. And so he went, and he's, I would once in a while just kind of like throw out like I love you. And he would just say like, oh, you're so cute, But I wanted him to know I still felt it, but I didn't want him to feel pressure to say it back. And
But just like, hey, just remind, just
Yeah,
just
hey,
letting you know, it's still
here,
still here.
still obsessed with you.
Yeah.
So I walked him to the train station. It was like, I don't know, like 10 o'clock at night. And sorry, I got distracted by my ducks.
No, are those the same ones and over there? They just kind of.
Oh yeah, they swim in the cove. Yep, there's the other two.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Oh, they're there.
Yep, there's two more.
Too funny.
So I walked him to the train station, and right before he got on the train, he said, "I love you." And I said, "I love you too." And then I went, "Wait, what?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I was like, "I love you, I love you."
Yeah.
Like I just kept saying it. Oh, like I had to say it enough to make up for the 14 days I wasn't going to see him.
Yeah.
And he was like, "It's okay. Like I'm coming back, and you can say it when I get back." And it was the longest 2 weeks of my life to be away from him. And I just remember driving up to, I don't know if I picked him up I must have picked him up in Hartford. But just sitting in my car waiting for him, and I just was like flipping inside out. I was so excited and so anxious and I had missed him so, like every fiber of my being missed him. And when he came out, I thought, my God, like I just couldn't, I couldn't even let him get in the car. I was like on him. Like I just had to, like if I could have gotten into his clothes, I would have. But I couldn't keep my hands off him like the whole ride home. And I took the next day off of work, and we just spent the whole day together. And after that, it was just like COVID was sort of starting to happen. And I can't remember. My divorce was in March, and COVID, we weren't locked down yet. So I got divorced March 4th.
What did that feel like? What did?
Amazing.
Like,
it was like the happiest
end of
day of my life.
End of a nightmare.
Yeah, it really was. It was just like, and I couldn't have done it without Dana, because Dana said, "Find a lawyer and I'll cut you a check."
Wow.
Like that's the kind of friend she is.
Wow.
So we were supposed to be like platonic lesbians. When I finally escaped, that was the plan.
Yeah.
We were going to travel the world as platonic lesbians. She's like, "I love you, and I would be in a relationship with you, but I no touching." And I was like, "No, that's cool. That's fine.
That's
like,
fine. Sounds like marriage, anyways.
Oh yeah, right.
I mean, not much of a difference.
Not mine. Da 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 da. Now you know that too.
The phone just went up again. Yeah. We're back. The night owl.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, she, huh? Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. All of a sudden,
I got to make a little money any way I can, man.
Yeah.
So a buck is a buck.
Yeah.
So I'm shameless. So Kris totally ruined that plan, and she was really irritated for a while because she's an only child, and she's comfortable and loves to travel, and everything we do together is hilarious.
Yeah.
So that was the plan, because I had never been anywhere or done anything, or I hadn't been out of the country until I was 43.
Wow.
So it was just going to be a big fat adventure, and Chelsea was going to come with us, and because she's the third to our little threesome, and Kris ruined it all. And luckily, she really likes Kris, and Kris really likes her. And but she was really mad at me because I would go to the beach with her every Saturday, because her parents have a place, her family has a place on Groton Long Point, and so I would scam my way onto that really nice beach every weekend, and that was just our thing. And I started oystering on Saturdays, and she was pretty hacked about that. And by now I was full-time with Kris. COVID happened. My job at the school, when we were remote, none of the kids that I had signed into class.
Yeah.
It was basically I would punch in, I would do a little paperwork, I would take my laptop wherever I went for meetings, and then, because I had gone back to school for a certificate for behavior intervention, and so I wasn't just an assistant anymore. I had a more important job, and Not that the assistants aren't important. They're very important and totally underappreciated and underpaid, but it was a different sort of position. And so I would go to work with Kris every day on building jobs. And I was like, this is really fucking fun. And I could just kind of like, the physical work was good. I liked it. And so I just became a sponge and I absorbed everything I could possibly absorb. And he's a really good teacher. And so it wasn't too long before I could keep up with him on a lot of things, like, you know, sheetrock and mudding and patching and you know, it was simple stuff, but I could do it in trim work. And so when I went back to school, I was just so unhappy. I mean, I wasn't with him. And I was really starting to fall apart. I don't know, like, what, I was so happy with him. I got my divorce. That was good. And then I really started to like come apart at the seams. And I just couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Like I was like afraid of a lot of things and I was nervous about everything and I felt really paranoid about a lot of things and
It's on this whole new, like this whole new world. It's like you're somewhere completely different now. So you're kind of, your instincts are not what they were. 'Cause it's not the same threat anymore.
Right. It was just all so weird. And I had heard through the grapevine that my ex had been fired. I didn't have my boys in my life. They were with him. They wanted a dad and they finally got one and he was really turning it on and you know, at that point, they thought I was a cokehead. They thought that my family hated me. They thought I abandoned them and didn't want them around anymore. When all of this went down, my oldest had just gone to boot camp. And, hang on, somebody is really bugging me.
Go ahead, do what you gotta do.
Sorry.
You gotta take it. If you gotta take a call.
No, it's just my son wrecked his truck last week.
Oh,
but
no.
That's a whole other.
That's another podcast.
That's like, yeah, I'll tell you after, but man, that's like, I have this joke that my family and I exist so that other people can say at least we're not them. Like that's the purpose we serve on this planet. So that's a good one. That's a winner. Oh, here comes the oyster boat. So they probably think I'm gone and then they're going to come back and like get a cold drink and lounge a little bit, but they're going to see me up and they're going to be like, back out. But I just like, I couldn't function. I couldn't concentrate. I was like falling asleep, sending emails. I would be like observing a student and I would fall asleep at the table. I just was like a fucking mess. And I couldn't organize my feelings. I was really scattered. I was not myself. And was so unhappy. And Kris said, come work with me. And I said, okay. And I gave my 2 weeks. And a week in, I returned my computer and my keys and said, I'm done.
That was it.
Then just went, you know, all the way with building and oystering. And, you know, then oystering went from Saturdays to whenever we weren't on a building job, we were oystering, or, you know, every night after a building job, we were oystering. And then I got really involved in the sales part of it. And, you know, for somebody who wasn't even allowed to open the mail, to then be told, make a business decision.
Yeah.
It's like,
huge difference.
What the fuck are you talking? Like, really?
Yeah.
Seriously? Me?
Yeah.
And I did, and it was a good one.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, well, that worked. And then I took off from there. And I realized really quickly that I liked not being invisible.
Right.
I was invisible for so long. And then I was like, I want to be out there. I want to be in the middle of every crowd. I want to be at every party. I want to be at every meeting. I want to be the contact person for everything. I just.
And it's so sad because, like, I know we just kind of met today. We go back and forth a little bit in text, but again, to know you, like, it makes me sad to think for 7, 8 years you had to be this emotionless person who you do fantastic, like just connecting with people.
Thank you.
Today, you know.
I was so ready for it when it was time.
Yeah.
You know, it was like so hungry for it that now like I can't. Kris teases me all the time because we'll be on a building job and I'll be just chit-chatting with the owner and he'll come in and he'll say, "You're paying her to talk. You know that, right?" It's like, shut up. And he's only kidding.
Yeah.
But he's like, he's like a quiet, get to work kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I just, like, I love people.
Yeah.
And I want to be around people all the time. And
Yeah.
not everybody.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Because there's some pretty awful people that I've come across in the last few years. And, but it's like I have all this time to make up for,
Right.
you know, in every aspect of my life.
Right.
And the oystering has just been so therapeutic because it's like so physically exhausting. Mm-hmm. But as I'm exhausting my body, I'm able to like process all of these things. Like there are days that I'll just like land on something that I went through and I'll just work through it all day.
Yeah.
And Kris knows, like, if I'm having a day, just don't talk to me.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, I'll get through it and I'm going to be fine by the end of the day. But oystering really gives you the opportunity.
Yeah, and explain like what that looks like. Like, so what? Like, I have no clue how to farm oysters. So like, how does it begin and how does it?
So it starts here.
Yeah.
We get the seed from Long Island. They're about the size of my pinky nail. This year we got 3.5 million, I believe. The numbers changed a little bit. They fluctuated because the hatchery had to change sizes a couple of times, and so I'm not sure what our final number will be. But you know, it starts with the seed. They get here and they go into what's called the upweller, and the upwellers they're also called flupsies, but I don't like that word, so we call it an upweller. And they're in these silos, and we have 16 silos, which is basically a dock. And in the center is a trough, and the trough 24/7 is circulating the water. And so all of the algae is constantly circulating through the silos. And so these little baby oysters are eating 24/7, which
Sounds
means
like me when I, after a long day, just give me ice cream.
Yum, yum,
Yeah,
yum,
right?
yum.
Yeah.
Well, they also poop 24/7, so I don't know if you do that. Maybe not.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Especially
Yep.
if we get the right food.
Oh, yeah. Yep, fiber.
Yeah.
So they poop all the time.
Yeah.
And so every single day, at least once a day, you pull each silo, which is about 80 pounds, 85 pounds, out up onto the dock, and they get hosed really thoroughly, and then they're put back in.
And how many do you have of those?
16.
16. Yeah.
Once a week, all of those come out, along with those, remember you asked me if that was a basket for crabs.
Yeah.
We have 3 lines of those. All of those run through the seed shaker. Yeah. And so that's like a barrel-looking machine, and it grades them, and you use the hose so you clean them really thoroughly, and it also starts to manipulate the shape.
Okay.
So our oysters have a really unique shape in that they're round, they're like smooth around the edge, and they have a really fat belly.
Yeah.
And so if you constantly handle them, you can get them manipulate them to get that shape. And so we start when they're really teeny. From here, they go into bags, and the bags go into cages, and they make their first stop in the river. We have 120 acres in the river. We only use maybe like 30 to 40 acres. You know, like land farming, some of it's good, some of it's not, but your parcel is your parcel. And so it's considered your acreage. And so as they grow, they move further down the river, and they end off of Ram Island when they're market size. But they go from here into bags, and the bags go into cages. Every 2 weeks, all of those oysters get brought in and run through, because now they're too big to go through the shaker. Now they go through the tumbler. So every 2 weeks, we go out and we pull up all those bags off the bottom. So that's, you know, up into the boat. From the boat, throw them up onto the dock. From the dock onto a pallet, drag them up the dock to the machine, and then they all get tipped into the hopper. They all run at least once, some run twice. As they move up and grow, because you always want your sizes to be alike. You don't want small oysters competing with large oysters.
Right.
And you want to keep them moving all the time because you don't want them to stick together.
Right.
Because as they grow, they will just clump.
I'll never look at oysters the same. This is amazing.
No, by the time you eat one, I've touched it like 40 times. Most farmers are like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Which is why we don't make any money. But that's why they're perfect.
Right.
So they, that's every other week. But in between, at low tide, we go out in the boat and you shake every bag. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you shake them and then you flip them over, because as they foul with seaweed on one side, you've got to flip them to the other side because they need constant flow to continue growing.
Right.
They have to be in bags because we have a lot of blue crabs around. So that stops them from getting eaten by the blue crabs. So from there, they go into bags. So the bags are on the bottom. All right, so the bags into cages, and they grow enough so it's bags on the bottom. And then once they're over 2 inches, or you can't squish them with your thumb, they can go directly on the bottom. And that's where they start to really pick up the color of the bottom and the mineral flavor of the bottom.
Okay.
So you can have oysters farmed on top, but the shells are always going to be brittle.
Yeah.
And they're never going to have a really strong mineral taste, which is what a lot of people want. I mean, you want it to taste like the ocean, but you also want to pick up the flavor of the substrate where they're grown. I mean, like some of our oysters have a grassy taste because they're on a bed that's close to eelgrass.
Right.
You can absolutely pick that up in the flavor.
Right.
So it's,
How long is the process?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, yep. So farms in Rhode Island, they can sell an oyster that's 2 inches, which is really pretty small. So they're like a 1-season deal. They get them in, they farm them quick, and then they're out again. For us, it's a much longer investment. The state of Connecticut won't let you sell anything under 3.
Wow.
So that's sort of a tough one because...
Any reason for that? Any reason why Rhode Island's like, hey...
We're the only state that has that limitation.
Wow.
So restaurants can bring in a small oyster from another state, but they can't sell a Connecticut oyster that's under 3 inches. So that's a pretty tough pill to swallow. Because a lot of people want a smaller oyster.
Yeah, really?
So that's difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, the real connoisseurs, they want a bigger oyster with a bigger belly. And
right.
Like the oysters we send to Emily, we grow specifically for her.
Right.
So hers are bigger than what we would send to a traditional, like a typical restaurant.
Right.
And she still serves them raw.
Yeah.
Because they're not like mealy or stringy or anything. They're still nice and supple.
Yeah.
At the size we send to Emily, it's just a little bit bigger than what we would typically sell.
Right.
It's like a 2-year process, and we handle them the entire time. And
you were saying that, would you compare almost like when you were first starting off with horses, like now oysters are kind of like your therapeutic work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the physical, and it's the caring for something.
Yeah.
Like I need to always be fussing over something or somebody. And so, at least I'm fussing over something that's making us a little cash.
Money. Right.
Right. And it pays for my my fussing. So, it's just.
So where are you like today? Like how you told us this whole story, which I think we mentioned live or when we were recording this. I felt like I was there. Where's Beth right now? Is everything like where you want it to be? Is there feel like there's so much more because you were almost like in this hiding in this prison for many years? What's next?
I don't know what's next. I mean, figuring out how to keep all this going is next.
Yeah.
It's a tough gig.
Yeah.
And it's somebody's getting into big trouble at the YMCA.
Right.
Somebody's like ultra naughty.
It's unbelievable how we could hear this conversation. They're gonna people listening
I'm
and
gonna call
be like,
that kid's parents and tell them, get that kid out of my fucking backyard.
I'm trying to do a podcast. Don't you get it?
Some of us are working.
Yeah. Right.
I have no idea what's next. I mean, I know what I would like to be next, but I don't know how to get there. So, I mean, I would like... I don't know. I would like for things to be easier. Because everything is a fight right now. It's like... we're in that place where we're like, are we assholes or something? Or like, did I do something wrong? Everything, I feel like, and Kris too, we have this discussion all the time. It's like, why is everything such a struggle? You know, if we've got the product, then, you know, there's a closure and we can't sell. If we don't have the product, then we've got a million people knocking on our door trying to get in. Or, you know, it's just always something, which I get.
Yeah. And how long have you owned the farm for?
Kris bought it in 2017.
Okay.
I blew in 2019. We
Okay.
became a woman-owned majority in 2020 when Dana bought in.
Amazing.
So Kris's former partner, who now works for our competitor, and is our, we share the co-op with them, which is another story. But she came in 2020, and as soon as our old partner was out, we jumped like 200%.
Amazing.
He didn't want to do any kind of field trips. He didn't want to do any charity work. He didn't want to do any outreach. And to me, that's the most fun.
That's how the company lives and grows.
But it's like, how can you not share it?
Yeah.
Like, what? Look at this place. How can I not share this?
I could be here all day and just, like we were about to say, let's crack open a drink and just do
Right.
another 5 hours of this.
Oh,
and just
absolutely.
complain about the kids at the YMCA, though.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
well, they'll shut up eventually. Maybe one of them will get stung by a
it's gonna
jellyfish.
whistle on 'em.
Yep. No fun allowed.
Yeah.
No going past your ankles.
What would you tell someone who was in your situation or is currently in the situation you were in with your ex-husband? Or if someone knows someone in this situation, like what would you tell them?
To someone that wants to get out,
Yeah.
it's okay. And it's going to be really hard. And it's going to be really scary. And it's not a straight path. Like, you're going to go backwards and you're going to get lost around weird corners, and it's never going to go away. And things are going to fuck you up, and you're going to see something or smell something or hear something, and it's going to fuck you up. But just let it.
Yeah.
Take a moment and let your body and your mind process what needs to be processed, because it's a part of you now. Like, you can't undo it. Sometimes you just have to walk through it, and it's going to be ugly, but that doesn't mean it's not worth it. And for people that are saying just leave, fuck off.
Yeah.
So you can't.
You were mentioning that. There's nothing that
It's not
someone
how that
can do.
works.
Yeah.
If I'm when you're bound to someone who makes it their life's work to contradict everything you say and do in your presence, what do you think they're going to do when you're not there? Like, how do you give up control? I mean, how do you give up your say? You know, like if you stay with that person, you have children, you've afforded yourself the opportunity to still talk them out of whatever asshole thing they're going to do. But if they have your kid and you're not there, there's nothing to stop them from undoing everything you've tried to do. I mean, if you want your kids vaccinated, are they going to say no? And that's going to be a fight. If you want to send your kid to this school and they say no, that's going to be a fight. I mean, like 50% saying what doctor they go to, what school they go to, what meds they take, what clubs they join, what activities they participate in, what they're allowed to do in their free time. I mean, it's endless. The torture that this kid's going to be in for. Everything becomes a fight. And for me, it was like, all right, I'll just take the fight. Because I'm a grown-up, and I had my turn to be a kid. And I did what I made the decisions I made. But my kids aren't going to suffer for it. So I was like, I'll just stay and be a buffer. And I think more people, It's not that they want to stay. It's not that they think they deserve it. It's that it's really fucking hard. Who's to say they're going to pay their child support? Enforce it. If you can't afford your groceries without child support, how are you going to afford an attorney to push them to pay the child? Like, you're banking on your ex being a good person when you leave.
Which is not going to.
And if they were a good person, odds are you wouldn't be leaving. So you're trying to separate yourself and these children from someone who doesn't make good choices. And when you remove yourself from the equation, how do you help them to make the right choice? Like, when spite becomes a part of the equation, it's a whole different ballgame, right? I mean, if they don't care what they're doing, if what they're doing is the right thing, they don't care about that. They just want to do what they need to do for themselves or to cause as much damage as possible. I didn't, for myself, and I'm sure there's got to be other women or men that feel the same way. I made this decision, and I'm gonna suffer, and I'm gonna be the collateral damage, but they're not. And if I stay and I play the game, I can get this person to do what I want when I want. So I'll give in on things that are important to me that relate to myself, and I'll make him feel like he's winning. But then when it comes to the kids, I've already like compromised for myself. Then they don't have to compromise. So like, right. If I make this person feel like they're in control for, this amount of time when it relates to me, then I can probably squeak out what I think is best for the kids without too much trouble.
Right.
And that's
exhausting.
Oh yeah.
That's exhausting.
Yeah. Yep. There's still days that I feel like I could sleep straight through like a weekend.
Yeah.
It's fucked up.
Yeah.
It just never goes away.
Yeah. Is there anything else, kind of start wrapping up, is there anything else you want to talk about or mention? Something that's important to you? I think last few words?
I want to end positive.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure, man.
Yeah.
I'm used to like, what do you guys want for dinner? But not, I don't know, just be good.
Yeah.
Why? It takes effort and energy to either be a good person and a kind person or a dick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why not just be good?
Yeah.
Like, stop and ask people if they're okay. You have no idea what somebody else is going through, and get like, I mean, as it pertains to oystering, I could go on and on and on about the bullshit that we face. Mm-hmm. Just getting picked at, and I think what we try to do oystering is what we try to do every day, and that's keep putting the good out, and hopefully the good comes back to you. And it doesn't feel like the good is ever going to come back to you some days, but it surprises you, and like it comes back when you least expect it, and
but you're like, what's the alternative, right?
Right. I might as well try to do something positive. Like, you never know who you're helping when you don't know you're helping. And like, how many times was I, so low and somebody said hi to me, and it was like, all right, well, they were just nice to me. And so I have to keep that going. And I think people should know always that they have value to someone, and they're important to someone. And I feel like all of this is so trivial that I'm saying, but it's
No.
like, because it's so obvious. It's so obvious to just not be an asshole to me, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like I'm wasting my opportunity to give some sort of great
No, I think
like advice, but
no.
that's like what do we have without kindness?
That's the thing. I think a lot of people are hurting. We never really look outside to see those because we're always,
Yeah.
focused on the inside.
Yeah.
And being.
Well, and now like where hatred is so acceptable, it's like it's the rule now. It's not the exception, and that's really scary.
Yeah.
And I think if we could all just be more tolerant and kinder.
Yeah. It'd be easier.
And the biggest thing that I'm a bugaboo about is that you should never take more help than you give. So, I think if we all focused on that, then wouldn't there be like this surplus of help that people could tap into when they were really stretched thin? Like, because sometimes you have nothing left to give. It's all just been stripped from you. And so if we're all giving more than we take, then there's got to be like a little pile somewhere for somebody to go take from, like a reserve, until they can get back on their feet and feel strong again. And then they're going to replace it.
Right.
And so it's like these like concentric circles of like good. Like if we just keep them going, they're going to keep touching, and then it's going to get another one going, and then another one going, and it can be endless.
This kind of reminds me of the oysters, the process of the oysters,
Right.
right? The
It's
continual
like-
flow of taking care
Absolutely.
of each other, and then if you
Right.
move on,
We
grow.
take care of them, and then they take care of us, and through that, we've been able to do good, and it's been, the oysters have been a source of pride and inspiration, and I mean, the financial part of it is great, because it's nice to be able to pay the mortgage, certainly, but like, the people I've met, like, you just have no idea what's coming around the corner, and if you're in a bad place, don't give up, because you have no idea.
Yeah.
If you had told me, 6 years ago where I would be, I'd say, you're fucking crazy. Like,
Yeah.
no way.
Yeah. And here you are.
And like, pinch me.
Yeah.
We just got married. It'll be a year in August, and it's madness.
Yeah.
My kids are flourishing, and they have this amazing man in their life, and they watch us work every day, and I'm learning something new every day on the farm, and I'm meeting all these new people through the farm, and getting to introduce, we have these field trips here, and they're like teaching kids about oysters and teaching them to shuck. And then, the next plan is to get more kids involved that don't have the opportunity to get into the saltwater. I mean, it shouldn't be sailing lessons or nothing, right?
Right.
This belongs to all of us, even though in Connecticut, everybody's like, stay off my beach. Now, that's not really how that works.
Yeah.
Like, we're all responsible for the health of the watershed, and how do we do that if we're limiting access to
Kind of goes back
a
to
select few?
Back to you and the horses. Like,
Right,
it's
like-
only a certain few could was
Right,
able
I had
to get the horse.
no business being anywhere near a horse farm
Yeah.
with where I came from, and it got me through life.
Yeah.
And so how many kids could we be helping? Like, how many kids are in their hot apartment today
Yeah.
in the city with
Yeah.
nothing to do, when they could be here digging up clams and cooking them on the
Learning.
fire pit and learning about the water and getting dirty and getting tired, and
Yeah.
it's a shame.
It's a shame.
So let's figure it out.
Yeah.
If anybody has any ideas, I'm open. I'll try anything.
I think we're gonna have a lot of listeners. I mean, this has been amazing, Beth. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And
You're
I think,
welcome. Thank you for listening. And
I think there's gonna be so many people that will listen, and it's gonna be a huge effect on them. I really do.
I hope so. I hope it helps somebody, because I'm eternally grateful for everybody that helped me get to where I am today, and to the people that put up with my craziness still to help me continue to heal and keep moving. So
Beautiful. Beth, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
thank you.